Hi, my friends. Welcome back for another chapter of Sarah Plain and Tall. Today I'm going to read to you chapter 4 from the book, but before I do, I want to ask you the questions for chapter 3. So, in the last chapter, how does Papa get ready for Sarah's arrival? What does he do? Do you remember that? Go ahead and press pause so that you can talk about your answers, and then press play again when you're ready to hear the next question. Number 2, how old do you think Caleb was, and what clues do you have in the story? Number 3, what did Sarah bring for Anna and Caleb as presents, and why do you think that she brought them? Number 4, how did Anna think that Sarah was feeling when she was looking at the prairie? Do you remember? How did Anna think that Sarah was feeling? Okay, are you ready for the answers? Number 1, when Papa was getting ready for Sarah's arrival, he combed his hair smooth and shiny. He put on a new clean blue shirt, and he put on his belt instead of his suspenders. He hitched up the horses and got ready to go with the wagon to go pick up Sarah at the train station, remember? Because they didn't have cars or airplanes back then, so the traveling was usually done by train or by wagon. Number 2, we don't really know how old Caleb was. So really, it seems to me like he would be somewhere around 8 years old, 7, 6, 7, 8 years old, because he seems like he doesn't really know how to read and write and do all of those things, because he had to ask Papa, remember what it said there in the letter? So I think he was somewhere around 6 or 7. What did Sarah bring for them? She brought a moon snail for Caleb and a sea stone for Anna. Okay? And how did Anna think Sarah felt? Well, Anna thought that Sarah was feeling lonely and that she was missing the sea, because there is no sea in Kansas, you see. There are no oceans around there. There's only land and land and land all around them. So she thought maybe Sarah would miss the sea. Okay, are you ready for chapter 4? Here we go. Ceci, are you ready for chapter 4? We're going to read the chapter 4, okay? And we're going to find out what Seal the cat is doing. And that's what Sassy wants to find out. Chapter 4. The dogs loved Sarah first. Lottie slept beside her bed, curled in a soft circle, and Nick leaned his face on the covers in the morning, watching for the first sign that Sarah was awake. No one knew where Seal slept. Seal was a roamer. Sarah's collection of cells sat on the windowsill. A scallop, she told us, picking up the shells one by one. A sea clam, an oyster, a razor clam, and a conch shell. If you put it to your ear, you can hear the ocean. She put it to Caleb's ear, then mine. Papa listened too. Then Sarah listened once more, with a look so sad and far away that Caleb leaned against me. At least Sarah can hear the sea, he whispered. Papa was quiet and shy with Sarah, and so was I, but Caleb talked to Sarah from morning until the light left the sky. Where are you going, he asked. To do what? To pick flowers, said Sarah. I'll hang some of them upside down and dry them so that they'll keep some color, and we can have flowers all winter long. Have you ever tried to do that? Maybe that's an experiment you can do. Go outside with your mom and dad or another adult, pick some flowers, tie them all up together, hang them upside down, and dry them for like a week or 2. And then you'll see if you turn them right side up, they won't move, they won't change. They dry and they stay the color that they were when they were alive. And you can keep them in a vase or in a cup, and they can decorate your house for forever. Okay, I'll hang some of them upside down and dry them so that they'll keep some color. And then we can have flowers all winter long. I'll come too, cried Caleb. Sarah said winter, he said to me. That means Sarah will stay. Together we picked flowers, paintbrush, clover, and prairie violets. There were buds on the wild roses that climbed up the paddock fence. Roses will bloom in early summer, I told Sarah. I looked to see if she knew what I was thinking. Summer was when the wedding would be, might be, Sarah and Papa's wedding. We hung the flowers from the ceiling in little bunches. I've never seen this before, said Sarah. What is it called? Bride's bonnet, I told her. Caleb smiled at the name. We don't have this by the sea, she said. We have seaside goldenrod and wild asters and woolly ragwort. Woolly ragwort, Caleb whooped. He made up a song. Woolly ragwort all around, woolly ragwort on the ground, woolly ragwort grows and grows, woolly ragwort in your nose. Sarah and Papa laughed, and the dogs lifted their heads and thumped their tails against the wood floor. Seal sat on the kitchen chair and watched us with yellow eyes. We ate Sarah's stew and the late light coming through the windows. Papa had baked bread that was still warm from the fire. The stew is fine, said Papa. Aye, Sarah nodded. The bread too. What does aye mean? Said Caleb. Oh, it means yes, said Sarah. Do you want more stew? Aye, said Caleb. Aye, echoed my father. After dinner, Sarah told us about William. He has a great and wide boat named the Kitty-Walkie. She looked out the window. It is a small gull found way off the shore where William fishes. And there are 3 aunts that live near us. They wear silk dresses and no shoes. You would love them. Aye, said Caleb. Does your brother look like you? I asked. Yes, said Sarah. He is very plain and tall. At dusk, Sarah cut Caleb's hair on the front steps, gathering his curls and scattering them on the fence and the ground. She batted some hair around the porch as the dogs watched. Why? asked Caleb. For the birds, said Sarah. They will use it for their nests. Later, we can look for nests of curls. Sarah said later, Caleb whispered to me as we spread the hair about. Sarah will stay. Sarah cut Papa's hair too. No one else saw, but I found him behind the barn tossing the pieces of hair into the wind for the birds. Sarah brushed my hair and tied it up in the back with the rose velvet ribbon that she had brought from Maine. She brushed hers long and free and tied it in the back too. Then we stood side by side looking into the mirror. I looked taller, like Sarah, and fair and thin. And with my hair pulled back, I looked a little like her daughter. Sarah's daughter. And then it was time for singing. Sarah sang us a song we had never heard before. As we sat on the porch, insects buzzing in the dark, the rustle of cows in the grasses. It was called Summer is a-comin' in, and she taught it to us all, even Papa, who sang as if he had never stopped singing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a video of this song because I don't know it. Otherwise, I would sing it to you. And I'll put the link in the description so that you can click on it and you can hear the song. And the words were, Summer is a-comin' in, lood sing cuckoo. What is summer? asked Caleb. He said it, Sumer. Oh, Sumer, because it's Sumer in the song, the way that Sarah said it. It means summer, said Papa and Sarah at the same time. Caleb and I looked at each other. Summer was coming. Tomorrow, said Sarah, I want to see the sheep. You know, I've never touched one. Never? said Caleb. Never, said Sarah. She smiled and leaned back in her chair. But I've touched seals, real seals. They were cool and slippery, and they slide through the water like fish. They can cry and sing, and sometimes they bark a little like dogs. Sarah barked like a seal, and Lottie and Nick came running up from the barn to jump up on Sarah and lick her face and make her laugh. Sarah stroked them and scratched their ears, and it was quiet again. I wish I could touch a seal right now, said Caleb, his voice soft in the night. So do I, said Sarah. She sighed and then began to sing the summer song again. Far off in the field, a meadowlark sang. And that is the end of chapter 4. Did you like that chapter, Sassy? Was that a nice chapter? How about you sit down? Sit down. Sit. Good girl. You sit down so I can read you another chapter? Yes? She wants me to read another chapter, so we're going to keep going. Chapter 5. The sheep made Sarah smile. She sank her fingers into their thick coarse wool. She talked to them, running with the lambs, letting them suck on her fingers. She named them after her favorite aunts, Harriet, Maddie, and Lou. She lay down in the field beside them and sang, Summer is a-comin' in. Her voice drifted over the meadow grasses, carried by the wind. She cried when we found a lamb that had died, and she shouted and shook her fist at the turkey buzzards that came from nowhere to eat it. She would not let Caleb or me come near, and that night Papa went with a shovel to bury the sheep and a lantern to bring Sarah back. She sat on the porch alone. Nick crept up to lean against her knees. After dinner, Sarah drew pictures to send home to Maine. She began a charcoal drawing of the fields, rolling like the sea rolled. She drew a sheep whose ears were too big, and she drew a windmill. Windmill was my first word, said Caleb. Papa told me so. Mine was flower, I said. What was yours, Sarah? Dune, said Sarah. Dune? Caleb looked up. In Maine, said Sarah, there are rock cliffs that rise up from the edge of the sea, and there are hills covered with pine and spruce trees, green with needles, but William and I found a sand dune all of our own. It was soft and sparkling with bits of mica, and when we were little, we would slide down the dune into the water. Caleb looked out the window. We have no dunes here, he said. Papa stood up. Yes, we do. And he took the lantern and went out the door to the barn. We do? Caleb called after him. He ran ahead. Sarah and I followed, and the dogs close behind. Next to the barn was Papa. Next to the barn was Papa's mound of hay for bedding, nearly half as tall as the barn, covered with a canvas to keep the rain from rotting it. Papa carried the wooden ladder from the barn and leaned it against the hay. Here, he said and smiled at Sarah. Our dune. Sarah was quiet. The dogs looked up at her, waiting. Seal brushed against her legs. Her tail was in the air. Caleb reached over and took her hand. It looks so high up, he said. Are you scared, Sarah? Scared? Scared? Exclaimed Sarah. You bet I'm not scared. She climbed the ladder, and Nick began to bark. She climbed to the very top of the hay and sat, looking down at us. Above, the stars were coming out, and Papa piled a bed of loose hay below with his pitchfork. The light of the lantern made his eyes shine when he smiled up at Sarah. Fine? Asked Papa. Fine, said Sarah. She lifted her arms over her head and slid down into the soft hay. She lay, laughing as the dogs rolled beside her. Was it a good dune? Called Caleb. Yes, it was a fine dune. Caleb and I climbed up and slid down, and Sarah did it 3 more times. At last Papa slid down too, as the sky grew darker and the stars blinked like fireflies. We were covered with hay and dust, and we sneezed. In the kitchen, Caleb and I washed in the big wooden tub, and Sarah drew more pictures to send to William. One was of Papa, his hair curly and full of hay. She drew Caleb sliding down the hay, his arms like Sarah's over his head, and she drew a picture of me in the tub, my hair long and straight and wet. She looked at her drawing of the fields for a long time. Something is missing, she told Caleb. Something. And she put it away. Dear William, Sarah read to us by lantern light that night. Sliding down our dune of hay is almost as fine as sliding down the sand dunes into the sea. Caleb smiled at me across the table. He said nothing, but his mouth formed the words I had heard too. Our dune. And that is the end of chapter 5. So now I got to ask you the questions for 4 and 5. And then remember, I'm going to put a link in the description below so that you can hear that song and what that song sounds like. Summer is a-comin' in. Here we go. Oh, Sassy just... Okay, fine, Sassy. Why do you think Sarah brought her collection of seashells with her? That is question number 1. Number 2, are there any clues that suggest Sarah might stay in Kansas? Number 3, what kinds of activities do Sarah and the family do together? Do you remember? We just read about a whole bunch of them. What is different about life on the prairie 100 years ago than life today? Those are the questions for chapter 4.